guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. We're currently in the middle of Spooktober, meaning that you can grab an exclusive Kowabana story every single day this month over on our Patreon for as little as $1. Head over to patreon.com/TaraADevlin if you'd like to support the show and get even more Japanese horror. And speaking of our Patreon, thanks to our wonderful patrons, we reached our goal to bring this week's special extra long episode to you. There are some stories out there that are so massive and imposing that they take a lot of time to translate and put together, and I'm very happy to be able to bring you one of those stories this week. It instantly grabbed my attention once I started reading and didn't let go. The theme of lost villages has always been one of my favorite story types, and this one gets downright chilling at times. Prepare yourselves, because this week we're heading deep into the countryside to visit the village that disappeared. This is the first time I've told anyone about this story, or even written it down. If you've got the time, I'd love for you to hear me out. It might get a little difficult to read, and most people will probably think I'm just trolling. I'll do my best to answer all your questions. I don't have much time, so I'll try to answer quickly. Well then, let's get started. I was born and raised in a village in the mountains. Only about 100 people lived there, and there was no school, so I went to the elementary and junior high schools in the city. Most of the villagers were middle-aged or older, and the high school and university students tended to move away. At the time, myself and my good friends A, a girl, and B, a boy, were the only kids around. We were all around the same age. We were the youngest people in the village, so the three of us always hung out and studied together, played by the river, went fishing, etc., etc. A was the smartest and, to be honest, she was beautiful. I often thought that it must have been really rare for someone as beautiful as her to have been born in such an out-of-the-way village. From an early age, she was raised as a shrine maiden by the local Shinto priest. As for B, he was a reliable guy and often the one who decided what games we'd play. He was a tough guy who knew a lot of stuff, so we were real good friends and we had a lot of fun together. Oh yeah, and the school in the city had so few students that it was on the verge of being abandoned. The village was mostly made up of rice fields, small rivers, and empty lots. There was an old shrine with a long history, and a single pond. There was a single grocery store and a clothes store also run by the villagers. To reach the village, you had to take a road from the nearby city, with a population of a few thousand. It was a single mountain road, about 20 kilometers long. This was the only way in or out, so it wasn't very convenient. With the village being so deep in the mountains, very few people visited who weren't somehow connected to someone already living there. Alright, having introduced you to a little of the village, let's get into the real story. This all happened during the summer when I was 15 years old, the summer of my 3rd grade of junior high. It's an incredibly unreal story, but I swear to tell it without fabrication. It might get a little long, but I'll do my best to explain it in an easy-to-understand way so that you can all follow along. First, let me tell you about the village's events and traditions. If you can identify the village, that doesn't really bother me. But even if you do, I really don't recommend going there. That point alone, I'd really like you to understand. So, about the shrine, festivals, and traditions. Since several hundred years earlier, there was a festival held at this shrine once a year. I don't think the name will give anything away, so I'll write it down. The name of the festival was the Tensei Festival, and it encompassed the entire village. It took place on August 15th, during Obon, and all of the villagers participated in an open-air dance that the rest of the world calls the Bon Festival dance. In our village, we called it the Oni-nashi dance, and it was a peculiar dance. Finally, the shrine maiden participated in a ceremonial dance that we called the Joen Kagura. This was another peculiar dance, and it brought about the end of the Tensei festival. There were 3 rules about the Tensei festival passed down to all villagers. These rules were passed from parent to child, then from child to grandchild. My parents also told me them when I was in elementary school, and they said the rules must never be broken. The rules were as follows. First rule. On August 14th, the day before the festival, all of the villagers, other than the Shinto priest and his family, were forbidden to go near the Shoga Pond, near the rear of the village. Second rule. On August 15th, the day of the festival, nobody from outside the village was allowed to come in, and nobody from inside the village could leave its borders either. Third rule. From August 15th, the first day of the festival, until August 20th, the last day of the festival, no matter what happened to you, your family, your friends, the other villagers, to the village itself, you could never speak a word of it to outsiders for the rest of your life. I'll do my best to answer whatever questions I can about the rules. I don't know when these rules first came into existence, but our ancestors passed them down without change, thinking of their descendants. As for what happened if you broke those rules, I had no idea. Regarding the first rule, it had long been passed down in our village that Shoga Pond was connected to an Oni nest. This was called the Oni of Shoga Pond legend. The Shinto priests had taken care of the forest surrounding Shoga Pond for generations, and people outside of the priest's family were forbidden to enter it without permission. There were 5 layers of sacred rope and 5 shrines surrounding the pond, and these were apparently used to seal it. In accordance with the first rule, on August 14th, nobody outside the priest's family was allowed to enter the forest, so they erected barbed wire around it, completely sealing the pond off. On August 10th, the 3 of us were playing in the brook as always. We splashed each other with water and squirted each other with our homemade guns. After we ate lunch, we thought about what to do next. "What do you want to do tomorrow?" I asked. "I have to practice for the Joen Kagura after lunch, so I can hang out if it's during the morning," A answered. "That's gonna start taking up a lot more of your time now, huh?" "As for me, there's something really special that I'm looking forward to. Or rather, looking forward to trying. Want to hear it?" B said. "Sure, tell us." "Okay, but don't tell anyone, okay? On the night of August 14th, how about the 3 of us sneak into the forest by Shoga Pond?" "But that means we'll be breaking the rules," I said. "On the day before the festival, A's family members will be watching the entrance and exit." "It's like he says," she agreed. "I don't think you should try it in the first place, but I don't think you'll be able to get in anyway." "I thought you guys would say that, so last night I cut open a section of the barbed wire. Plus, you know how there are small shrines inside the forest, right? Well, apparently, you can find one a short distance from the animal trail that leads to the pond from the barbed wire fence. I heard my parents talking about it the day before yesterday, and apparently it's been there since before this village even existed. And if you touch the stone inside it, then you'll be able to see something." "I haven't heard anything about that from Mum and Dad, but if it's true, then I'm intrigued," A said. "Same. I've never heard that before, but it sounds interesting. So, what will you be able to see if you touch it?" I don't know. I heard my parents right as they started talking about it, but after that, my dad changed the subject. I see. Well, not gonna lie, I'm scared. But I believe you. Let's go check it out. Me too. The Tensei festival starts the following day, so my father will probably tell me to get to bed early, but I'll do my best to sneak out. We'll meet you nearby then, but what time? Maybe around 8 that night? If something happens and it's too late, then we'll be in big trouble, so I'd rather go a little earlier. Alright, got it. So then, what are we gonna do tomorrow? I got back to the topic at hand. Well, A's busy in the afternoon, so why don't we play cards at your house? Fine by me, A said. Alright, come over tomorrow morning around 9 then. Because we didn't understand the importance of following the rules, something terrible was about to happen. I was unable to stop A, her family making up the history of the village itself, and B, my closest friend. In fact, I went along with them. It was the biggest mistake of my life. August 11th. Those who lived outside the village returned. Counting both the adults and high school students, this was about 10 people, and by adding them to the number who lived inside the village, you'd get the real population number. Preparations for the Tensei festival began on this day. Everyone cleaned the road leading up to the shrine, as well as the shrine itself and the Kagura hall, and also the paint. People also prepared stalls, and the road leading to the outside world was completely blocked off. They also started sealing the forest around Shoga Pond. People were hard at work everywhere. We were worried they might seal up the section of forest that B had left open, but according to him, it was still fine. We hung out at my place that morning, and then in the afternoon, I set out to go fishing by myself. August 12th. All entrances into the village were completely sealed. All of the forests around the village were also closed off with mesh, so the village was completely separated from the rest of the world. The entrance to Shoga Pond through the forest was also sealed, and the priest's family patrolled the area. Most of the decorations and cleaning for the places involved in the festival was already done, and the stalls were nearing completion as well. A spent the whole day practicing for the Jouen Kagura, so I studied in the morning, and then I spent the afternoon fishing with B. August 13th. Most of the preparations for the festival had finished. The stalls were ready to go, so all that was left was to wait for the day itself. The chief priest, A's father, summoned the entire village to speak about the upcoming festival. He confirmed the rules once more, as well as the Oni-nashi dance, the Jouen Kagura, and then he ended with something important he had to tell us all. My daughter will be performing in this year's Jouen Kagura once again. I dare say it will be perfect. I hope you'll all watch over her fondly as well. Everyone laughed and A blushed with embarrassment next to me. Honestly, I thought she looked rather cute. August 14th, the day before the festival. Lunchtime. The villagers all gathered once again to hear from the chief priest. He handed out flyers explaining the festival schedule and other related matters. That night, we were to head towards the small shrine inside the forest by Shoga Pond. We confirmed matters once again after the gathering was over, and then the three of us went to A's house. She told us she wanted us to watch the Jouen Kagura. She put on the mask her shrine maiden ancestors had worn, grabbed a folding fan and an evergreen sakaki branch, and then performed the dance for us. It must have been only 3 minutes long, but it felt much longer. Honestly, the dance moved me. B also smiled and clapped when it was over. August 14th, the day before the festival. Evening. Once again we confirmed our plans for the night, and then each made our way back home. I ate dinner, grabbed a torch, bug spray, and a whistle, just in case something happened. August 14th, the day before the festival. Night. At 7:30, I said to my parents, "I'm heading over to B's house. I left something there," and went over. He wasn't there when I arrived, which meant that he must have already gone. I made my way towards the designated meeting point to find A. "Sorry to keep you waiting," she said. "Your parents didn't see you?" I asked. "I told them I was going to practice for the Joen Kagura and then slipped out." "Ah, okay." B wasn't at home. "Really? Are we still going to be able to go on time?" About 10 minutes later, B arrived. "Where the hell were you?" I asked. Sorry. I went to check the barbed wire that I'd left open. There'd be no point going if they fixed it, but looks like they didn't touch it. So, looks like we'll still be able to get in." "Shall we go then?" A asked. "Yeah, it's only a few minutes away, so let's check we've got everything ready on the way," I agreed. "All right, let's go." We made our way towards the opening B left, trying not to let anyone see us. "Looks like the priest's family really are patrolling the area," I said. I couldn't see them clearly, but I could see numerous figures in the distance walking around. "Let's go when we see a gap," B said. "B, you go first. We don't know where it is," A said. "All right." We moved once the figures stepped away from the hole. I scrambled to get through it. "Hey, B, I'm stuck." "Keep going. You'll get through." My clothes got caught on the wire, but somehow I was able to push through. B and A passed through easily, and then we entered the forest. "Now what?" I said. "If we pass through the northeast of the forest, we should come out at the animal trail, so let's go there first," B said. "The forest is kinda creepy," A muttered. "Yeah." We turned our lights on and started walking towards the animal trail. Even though we lived in a village in the mountains and the forest was full of animal trails, we'd never entered it at night and seen the animals running around. Wild dogs barked in the distance, and bugs swarmed at our feet. B and I were fine, but A clung to my sleeve the entire time. She really is a girl, I thought. About 30 minutes had passed, and yet we still hadn't reached the animal trail. "Hey, B, we still haven't reached the path yet. Are we going the wrong way?" "I'm using a compass, so I doubt it." "Show me." "Look." We really are going the right way." "Is everything okay?" A said. "We've already come this far and we'll probably get lost if we turn back now, so all we can do is keep going," I said. "Okay." "Let's go," B said, and we started walking again. About 5 minutes later, we reached an animal trail. "Was this always here?" I asked. "I think so. And it makes sense time-wise," B said. "What now?" A asked. "We keep going and check this is the right path by seeing if the pond is just over there, right?" "Yeah." "Don't get too close to it," A warned us. B and I had never even seen Shoga Pond before, but A had apparently visited it once with her parents when she was younger. As such, we didn't know whether this was the trail that would lead to the small shrine, so we had to go and check if the pond was nearby first. "I can't hear any animals anymore," B said a few minutes later. "Yeah, I don't hear those dogs anymore," I agreed. "Hey, what's wrong?" She didn't look well. Ever since we reached the trail, I felt a chill, she said. Are you okay? I can lend you my jacket. A was wearing a dress, so it was natural she might be a little cold as night fell. It's not a chill on my skin. It's a chill in my heart, she replied. It was then that we realized she wasn't doing so well. Maybe she was mentally exhausted. Do you want to go back? I asked. But if we don't see where the pond is first, we'll just get lost, B said. That's true. Do you think you can keep going, eh? Maybe for a little. Let's go. Alright. If something changes, you let us know, alright? Shall we pick up the pace then? B asked. Eh? What do you want to do? This speed is fine. Alright. At that moment, I instinctively felt that things weren't okay. Maybe it was a sixth sense or something. I don't know. Oh? B said again after walking a short distance. What? He seemed to have noticed something. There's a small shed up ahead. Why don't we take a quick break there? A shed? There really was one just up ahead on the path. You want to take a break there? A asked. Yeah, sure, I replied. I didn't want to push A too much, so we agreed to stop and rest there. For some reason, I didn't suspect anything was wrong with that shed. It's pretty old, huh? I said. It was covered in plants and weeds, and even looking up at the sky, above us was covered with dense trees, so not even the moonlight got through. Let's go inside so we can all have a rest, B said. Yeah. B turned towards the door and opened it. It wasn't locked. A remained silent the whole time. B quickly searched for a chair after entering and let A sit down on it. Inside was a desk and chair, various small items like a knife, and various other stuff all over the ground. The place smelt weird. A sat down in the chair and B looked around the outside of the shed. I decided to look around inside. Around the corner from where everything was lying on the ground, a hall led to another door. What's this? I said. I tried to open it, but then I heard a strange noise coming from inside. My hand froze for a moment, but then curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the door. Inside was a Japanese-style toilet, and I quickly realized that this was where the strange smell was coming from. The window above it was broken, and I could see the forest outside. As I turned around to leave, I suddenly heard a voice behind me. It sounded like it was getting worked up, like it was looking at me from somewhere. I froze. Even when I tried to turn around, I was too scared, and I couldn't. I stood there, frozen on the spot. The voice was slowly getting closer. Then, "Hey, what are you doing?" B had returned to the shed. I turned around at the same time, and the voice disappeared. B dragged me away and then slammed the toilet door shut. "Hey, are you okay?" B asked. "Oh, it's you." Jeez, the both of you. A was sleeping in a chair out the back there, and I find you here, standing in front of the toilet, wetting yourself. I really had wet myself. I was so scared that I didn't even notice. I told B what had just happened. I have no idea what that could have been, but at any rate, I think we should get out of here. Right? Let's go get A. We returned to the main room. "Hey, where's A?" I asked. "Huh? What the?" She was sitting on that chair just a few seconds ago." A had vanished. Then we suddenly heard a noise in the corner of the room. "Hey, A!" I ran over, and there was another door built into the wall. "What the hell is this?" B said. We opened the door, and there was a set of stairs. They led to the second floor. I honestly hadn't even noticed that the place had a second floor. Everything outside had been covered by the trees and vines. "Did A go up there?" I asked. "She must have. The front door's still shut." We slowly climbed the stairs. The wood was so rotten that if we went any faster, I feared we'd fall right through it. We reached the second floor, and I went to open the door. "Hey, wait!" "What?" "Look closely at the door." The door was covered in hundreds of pieces of paper. Charms. There were also piles of salt on each side of the door. But not only that, the piles of salt had turned black. You don't have to be a genius to see that this place is dangerous. But the charms where the door meets the wall have been broken, so no doubt about it. A's gotta be inside, B said. "We have to go in," I agreed. "I'll open the door," B said, and then he kicked it as hard as he could. At that very same moment, something powerful sent him flying back down the stairs. "Hey, B! Quick, look inside!" I looked inside the room. A was standing there, but something about her was strange. She was looking in my direction, with both her hands up in the air. "A!" I said, and went to run into the room. A black figure like a human shadow appeared behind her, glaring at me with cloudy red eyes before chasing me back out. I quickly slammed the door, grabbed a handful of the black salt, and ran back downstairs. Once I reached the bottom, A stood at the ready with a knife he'd picked up from the floor in hand. "B, run! A's still up there!" At that very same moment, something black approached us from the Japanese-style toilet. "Shit!" B screamed. With the knife in hand, we both ran out of the cabin. A's scream echoed throughout the cabin as we fled. "A! Damn it!" B screamed. He went to run back inside, but the black thing chased after us again. It moaned as it approached us. B threw the knife he was holding at it, and I threw the pile of salt I'd grabbed. The black thing stopped moving, and B and I took the opportunity to run again. We ran as fast as we could back down the animal trail, tripping over numerous times. Honestly, my memories of that time are kind of vague. I don't remember it so well now. After running as fast as we could for several minutes, I tripped over, and I heard that voice beside my ear again. Again we took off at full speed, finally coming out of the forest at the barbed wire surrounding it again. I blew the whistle I'd brought along, trying desperately to get the attention of any of the adults outside. Members of the priest's family finally noticed us and ran over. When they realized we'd come out of the forest surrounding Shoga Pond, the other villagers quickly heard, and both our parents, families, and the priest's family and other villagers gathered at the entrance to the forest. We didn't have to say a thing. They could gather by the state of our clothes that something bad had happened, and they quickly dragged us over to the inner sanctuary of the shrine. Various villagers were already waiting inside, and the atmosphere felt strange. "First, I will cleanse you two of the thing that has attached itself to you," the priest said. "Prepare yourselves. It will be painful." He forced us to drink both sake and vinegar, and then he covered us in salt. When he hit us hard on the back, we both threw up. When we looked at it in the candlelight, I'd thrown up what looked like a bunch of hair, while B had vomited numerous Shinto charms. The priest's family began chanting as he drew characters on our backs, and again, B and I threw up repeatedly, only this time it looked to be full of live bugs. This process took several hours, and then they let us bathe before returning to the inner sanctuary. "Now, tell us everything that happened," the priest said. B and I told him everything, under the hateful glares of his family and the rest of the villagers. As we were talking, the priest suddenly hit us as hard as he could. His wife, A's mother, passed out once we were done talking, and all we could do was hang our heads before our parents. Having brought such great trouble down upon my parents and relatives, I thought the villagers would chase me out of town. "The more I listen to your story, the less I believe it," the priest said. "Yet after speaking with my family just now, I have something even more unbelievable to tell you. Listen to me carefully." To put some order to everything the priest told us after speaking with his family, the cabin we visited was known throughout the village as the Oni Cabin legend. Most of the villagers had heard of it, but when we spoke to them, few believed it to be true. I had no idea it was real. I went looking for it in the past myself. According to the priest, the cabin was real, not a legend, but unless the cabin wanted you to find it, you couldn't. He had apparently tried to find it himself as a boy, but he'd been unable to. Once the cabin invited you, you would unconsciously make your way towards it. In that case, if you entered the forest outside Shoga Pond for another reason, you would find yourself at the cabin first. In short, the cabin had invited us and revealed itself to us before we ever found that small shrine near Shoga Pond. According to one of the elders from the priest's family, that cabin was called the Oni Cabin, but what lived inside it wasn't an Oni, nor even a ghost. What lived inside that cabin, the black thing we'd seen, was called a shosha, a damaged person. There were two of them in the cabin, a man and a woman. Both the man and the woman had once been humans. According to the legend passed down in the village, several years earlier, an avalanche destroyed several kilometers of the road leading from the village down into the city. The stream in the village flooded thanks to heavy rain, and this damaged the crops and made them unusable. The village suffered a great famine. One day, while the starving villagers were searching for crops, a man from the village dragged a woman deep into the forest and locked her inside the cabin. Starving and at his wit's end, the man attacked the woman and made her his slave. To put it simply, he used her for his own pleasure. The woman was suffering from malnutrition thanks to the famine, and she grew weaker and weaker until she finally died. Starving for meat, the man cut her up and then ate her. And seeking that same pleasure again and again, he sought out woman after woman, killing and then eating them. Some of them he even ate while they were still alive. And, being a man, the only victims he ever sought out were women. Rumors of what the man was up to soon spread throughout the village, but rather than capturing him, the other men also took to killing the women and then eating them. Madness consumed them, killing and eating each other. They killed the man who killed the first woman, and then they killed the women who saw them do that and ate them too. The village, populated by several hundred people then, was reduced to mere dozens, and the last man who ate the last woman then walked to the cabin in the woods, where he killed himself. According to the legend, it was this man who became the male shosha in the cabin, and the first woman who was attacked, killed, and eaten became the female shosha. Both of them had apparently attached themselves to B and I. the man to B, and the woman to me. After the village was annihilated, the ancestors of the current Shinto priest, the first generation, moved in and began the process of reviving it. They then built the shrine for the god who would protect the village. They buried the bones of the villagers they found on the roads and in their houses, in the pond deep in the forest, and to seal their malice to that very spot, they named the pond Shoga, sealing them with the name itself. So that later generations would be able to protect the village with their own power, they then built a small shrine deep in the forest, and there deified a rock they had sealed with their own power. As the strong malice continued to grow inside the cabin, they sealed the second floor door with charms, and then sealed the cabin itself so that nobody would be aware of its existence. Yet, that was the limit of the first priest's powers, and as a result, people were able to find the cabin if it itself invited them in. The descendants of this priest dubbed the cabin the Oni cabin, and they called those who lived inside it the Shosha. In order to mourn for those villagers who died, in order to protect those still alive from the Oni, in order to make sure the Oni that was born in this village never got out, the first priest started the tradition of a village-wide festival held at the shrine on August 15th each year. In other words, he left behind the Tensei festival, the Oni-nashi dance, and the Jowen Kagura. And to stop this process he'd put into place to protect the village from falling apart at the seams, the first priest also put into place 3 rules. Those who moved into the village, meaning the ancestors of the current villagers, inherited the legend to protect the village forever. A long time passed, and the village continued with the traditions, but then one year, a certain family that knew of the legend went to visit the small shrine in the forest. They intended to steal the first priest's power. They thought if they could break the stone there, they would be able to take that power as their own. Other villagers who learnt of their plan alerted the priest's family, and they were able to prevent it from happening. The family who tried to steal that power were ostracized and chased out of the village. Having destroyed all of their relationships and finding themselves in a large amount of debt, the entire family then flung themselves into a river and committed suicide. After that, it was decided not to let most of the villagers know about the small shrine or the legend, and from that generation onwards, the priest's family took control of the shrine and sealed it so nobody could get in. Yet B's family ignored that decision, and they passed down knowledge of the shrine throughout the generations, and it was from listening to his parents that B learnt of it as well. The seal surrounding the small shrine weakens on August 14th, so the priest uses that time each year to fix it. And according to him, the seal wouldn't weaken until August 14th of the next year, but thanks to a strong ill will, that seal had broken, and it was possible to take the first priest's power. And now, the entire village has learnt of the secrets we were trying to hide, the priest said. Normally, this would result in B's family being exiled, but I don't care about that right now. A has been locked prisoner in that shed, and we must prepare to go get her, one of his relatives said. Okay, the priest began. Myself, you, and B-kun will go to rescue A with the rest of my family. Even we are not sure of how to break the seals the first priest placed around that cabin. Only you two, who the cabin has summoned, will be able to find it again. Honestly, there is no evidence suggesting my daughter is even alive right now. We may already be too late, but please, help us. We'll bring A back here without a doubt. Leave it to us, I said. I'm the one who broke the rules, but I believe that it is God's will that I help bring her back, B said. We'll accompany you there most of the way, the priest's relative continued. Once you find A, make her drink this purified water immediately, and then put this charm on her back. Then sprinkle this purified salt over her, and if the shosha appear, please chant the Shingon mantra. I think the mantra should stop the shosha for a few seconds, the priest continued. But if it doesn't, you'll have to run as fast as you can back to us. Don't forget, you mustn't stop. Okay, we replied. Then we readied ourselves. August 15th, day of the Tensei festival, 1 a.m. B, myself, the priest, and the priest's family made our way up the animal trail towards Shoga Pond. The two of us will continue from here, I said. We'll help A and bring her back, B continued. We're counting on you. Don't forget what I told you. We won't. B and I walked down the animal trail. Along the way, the forest around us fell silent, and we no longer heard any animals. We must be there soon, I said. Yeah. Once we emerged from the darkness, the cabin stood before us. B and I silently checked that we had everything ready before going in. Huh? I said. What's wrong? No, I don't remember putting any scissors in my pocket. Are they cloth scissors? They might come in handy. Yeah. We were ready for our final battle. The plan was as follows. B and I would burst into the cabin at the same time. If there was a shosha on the first floor, B would handle them. I would take that opportunity to go upstairs and save A. If there was a shosha on the second floor, we would stop them there, drag A downstairs, and I would protect both B and A as we ran back to the priest's family on the animal trail. It wasn't really much of a plan, but it was all we could do. Let's go, I said. Yeah. The two of us screamed and ran for the cabin like something out of a cartoon. We didn't encounter any shosha on the first floor, so B remained there while I ran upstairs. I kicked the door open as hard as I could. Hey! I screamed, hoping to threaten any shosha that might be inside. What I found was A, naked, her hands strung up towards the roof and her feet tied to the floor. There were no shosha around. She said my name when she saw me. A! She was bound and tied up, but more than anything else, I was happy that she was still alive. I cut the rope tying her with the scissors, made her drink the purified water, and then put the charm on her back. Then I covered her in salt. I carried A downstairs, and then she screamed, "Behind you!" I turned around. A black something hanging by the neck stared at me. No, it was the male shosha, and it was muttering something I couldn't understand. I panicked and I started chanting what the priest had taught me. But the male shosha continued to approach us. What the hell? I started walking down the stairs backwards with A. Then she started a Shingon chant as well. The male shosha started to twitch and convulse, and we continued down the stairs. Then we ran out of the cabin. Hey, let's go, now! B screamed. Yeah! We ran down the animal trail when we heard a loud, angry scream behind us. It was the female shosha. She's here! B chanted the Shingon chant, and the female shosha disappeared. It seemed to work just fine on her. Looks like it worked, B said. But then I heard a familiar sound, and a bad feeling washed over me. The female Shosha screamed again, like a war cry, appearing by B's feet and grabbing his ankles. "B! Go!" he screamed. The female Shosha dragged him back towards the cabin. I ran as fast as I could, swearing I'd come back to help him. We finally reached the priest's family. "You're back!" "Where's B-kun?" the priest asked. "The Shosha caught him. He let A and I escape." "I see." "Quick, take A back to the inner sanctuary," one of her relatives screamed. We all returned to the village. There, the villagers had a message for the priest. B's family left the village earlier. "What?" "They broke the rules, huh?" According to the villagers, B's entire family used the time we were inside the forest to get in the car and burst through the fence blocking the way out. It was the day of the Tensei festival, which meant they'd broken the second rule about not leaving the village. They had probably gone because they feared being ostracized anyway. Honestly, leaving the village while abandoning their son and successor really pissed me off. August 15th, day of the Tensei festival, 6 a.m. A was led into the inner sanctuary, and a purification ritual prepared to cleanse her. They led her out to the waterfall, where her parents performed the ceremony. At the same time, I was called back to the inner sanctuary to speak to one of her relatives. "I'll get straight to the point. We may be too late to save B," he said. A being a young woman was to her advantage here, and the Shosha likely confined her just to play with her. But B is a young man. To the Shosha, he is nothing more than a hindrance. For that alone, he will probably be killed. I had sworn to go back and help him, but now I wasn't so sure. I asked if it would still be possible to save him, but even as I said it, tears fell for the loss of my best friend. "His soul may be trapped in that cabin forever," the priest said. "He will become the second male Shosha. There is nothing we can do about them, and their existence has already become a loop. If you are still being summoned by the cabin, then you may be able to go back there one more time to see him. Only this time, you will undoubtedly be killed. And if that happens, A will be alone. Don't forget that." Even as I cried, I knew it wouldn't be solved with tears. The priest told me everything I wanted to hear. If I died, A would be alone. I felt bad for B, but I couldn't let myself die too. That was the first time I realized I could be inhuman as well. August 15th, day of the Tensei festival, 10 a.m. A's purification ceremony ended, and then they started purifying the damage done to us by the Shosha, which, to put simply, was everything. Both of us stripped and put on white clothing, and they showered us with cold water numerous times as they read a Shinto prayer. At several points, A broke out into tears, and the cleansing took about 3 hours all up. When it was done, it felt like something had disappeared from my body. I felt lighter. Then the priest spoke to me about A. "The damage done to you by the impurities has been completely cleansed. I saw that the harm done to A's entire body was cleansed. I fear that, while she was confined in the cabin, she was close to being assaulted numerous times." His hands shook in anger as he spoke. I asked him why he told me that. "When the time comes, I think you will make the correct decision regarding my daughter. She is worried about you. Promise me that next time, you will make the correct choice." Listening to his laden words, I swore that next time I would protect her. August 15th, day of the Tensei festival, 11 a.m. After the purification and lunch, A and I went back to her family's mansion to relax. A and I hadn't spoken since just before she was captured in that cabin. I decided to try talking to her. We've got some time, so do you want to play cards? Sure. All right. Finally, we were able to have a normal conversation again. As we played cards, we chatted about what happened the night before when we entered the forest. How she couldn't remember anything until after the purification ceremony, and how, as she was eating lunch, she realized she could now see what looked like ghosts. Even though she couldn't remember what happened at the cabin, she was still physically and mentally hurt. This would be the most important lesson of my life, I swore to both A and B. A's parents then told her about B's family moving away. August 15th, day of the Tensei Festival, 3 p.m. All of the villagers gathered in front of the Kagura Hall at the shrine at the priest's request. He apparently had something serious to tell us. A and I made our way over there. This may be a little sudden, but we're cancelling the Tensei Festival, the priest began. I'm thankful to everyone who helped get the festival ready, but since yesterday, numerous events have taken place that we couldn't even begin to imagine. The Oni cabin, B's family running off, and the breaking of the spiritual stone at the shrine in the forest. Regarding the shrine in the forest, I went there yesterday morning myself to repair the seal. When I went there, neither the seal nor the stone were broken. This morning, when I went to check, there was nothing wrong again. Both the seal and the first priest's spiritual stone were broken. I was unable to sense any power coming from the stone whatsoever, which means that somebody took it and then broke the stone after. The power from that stone helped seal this village, which means that we are now unable to maintain it. All of the seals have broken. The sealed spirits are free to leak out, and this village will fall into ruin. The villagers fell into a panic at such sudden news. Although nobody said it out loud, everyone suspected B's family had a hand in breaking the spiritual stone. Starting now, all of the village's rules have been appealed, the priest continued. My family have decided to leave. We will be leaving the village tonight. That is all. I hadn't expected this to happen. The village was going to fall into ruin? I was confused. So much had happened since the day before, but from the bottom of my heart, I didn't think that any of it would end up affecting the entire village. But looking back on it, every single reason that had led the village to ruin could be traced back to me. I wondered what my family would do next. It looks like both our families are going to head to a hotel, A said. Really? I overheard our fathers talking. I see. For some reason, I was relieved. Maybe it was because I could stay with A, or maybe because we were leaving the village. Countless thoughts were running around in my head. August 15th, 5 p.m. 2 hours had passed since the priest's announcement. The whole village went into a panic after hearing it. I saw people getting ready to leave, others insisting they would stay, and people fighting all over the place. A's family and my own had decided to temporarily stay in one of the hotels my family managed. Apparently, I would be changing schools as well. This is goodbye to the entire village, A said. Yeah. I wonder what's going to happen to it. I have no idea. According to what I directly heard from the priest, the spiritual power the first priest had sealed inside the stone had been effective up until the year he died, but after that, it soon waned. through the first priest's descendants creating the rules for the Tensei festival, through the feelings of the villagers to protect and not break those rules, the stone was then able to somehow gather power and transformed into a spiritual stone, and that power then became the nucleus that protected and sealed the village, creating a barrier around it. With the spiritual stone broken and that power stolen, the hundreds of seals and barriers around the village had started to fall apart, and apparently they would all be destroyed within 5 days' time, on August 20th. When they were gone, the village would be struck with disaster after disaster. Honestly, whether the legend was true or not, I couldn't help but think that some things were still hidden from us. As for the breaking of the small shrine seal, the priest apparently had doubts about that himself. To put those doubts in order, first it appeared that the person who had broken the seal was alone, judging by the evidence. There was no doubt that B's family knew the location of the small shrine, and because numerous footprints had been left around the area where the spiritual stone had been broken, there was no doubt that it had been one of B's family members. But to break the seal surrounding the small shrine, supposing that one even knew where it was in the first place, they would become powerless thanks to the seal that zapped the life energy of any who approached, so they shouldn't have been able to get near it in the first place. Generations of priests restored weakened sections of the seal, and with the methods they used in front of it, they were somehow able to fix the weak sections. The spiritual stone was destroyed right after the priest had done this, so the seal would have been at its strongest, meaning a person wouldn't have been able to break that seal. But something else could have, thereby allowing one of B's family members into the small shrine. I felt uneasy, like it was something I shouldn't forget. August 15th, 7 p.m. I got in A's family car and we left the village. At the same time, members of both our families gathered together everything important we owned, put them in a large truck, and then followed us. Didn't you notice something at the start of all this? That it would end like this? It's like I've forgotten something, I murmured. You forgot something? A said. No, I'm probably just imagining it. I tried not to think about it too much. Then, we put the village behind us. As our families left the village, that marks the end of the main part of the story. But there was still more to come. August 16th, 8 a.m. The next morning, A and I played cards again. I just beat her because she was too slow to show her hand, and we both laughed about it. Luck must be on my side today, I thought, and we enjoyed playing a few more games together. According to the priest, around 30 people had escaped from the village the day before, most of them the elderly, and most of them would be moving into a home for senior citizens. According to one of the families who left during the night, they found a beast about 120 centimeters tall, with 6 arms and blood all over its face, standing between the rice fields. When they passed it in their car, the head of a wild mountain dog lay at its feet. It had pulled its brains out and was playing with them, not even bothering to look at the car as it drove past. The priest claimed that this beast was the physical embodiment of the malice left behind of the children who were eaten. It wouldn't attack humans, but apparently it would play with any other type of animal. The beast I spoke of just now is a monster that appears as a phenomenon itself, and it's said the reason that monster exists is because the village itself released it, the priest said. The existence said to be connected to the village, people connected to the village, those who know of the village, the monsters, and those who know of the fate of the village are then possessed and help spread the curse even further. Disasters will now befall the village because of that connection. When the village becomes devoid of people, it will become a gathering spot for that curse, a gathering spot for the monsters. I didn't have any lingering affection for the village, and while it was cruel to be, I cut all ties with it. Above all, as long as myself, my family, and A were fine, it was nothing to me if that village became a hangout for various yokai and monsters. That was how I felt. According to the last family who left the village, there were about 20 people still there, mostly the elderly and middle-aged. Starting from August 17th, they started seeing black figures in increasing numbers around the village. They had muddy red eyes, and they would scream and chase the villagers with unnatural movements. Those who saw this went mad, one after the other. Several days after that, they would either take their own lives, running screaming into the forest around Shoga Pond, or start biting and eating their family members. They saw all sorts of strangeness going on. Apparently someone who saw this and then tried to leave the village was stopped by numerous other villagers who had stripped free of their clothes and then jumped onto the car. Those who were able to hold out for a few days would inevitably succumb, strip naked, and wander the village in a group at night, entering homes and screaming and jumping upon anyone they found, before dragging them off somewhere. During a situation like this, the police have to mobilize. On August 18th, the police entered the village. However, no matter how much they searched the houses and forest, they didn't find a single person left alive. Instead, they found corpses all over. They found bodies boiled in their bathtubs. They found numerous bodies floating in the river, and several more hanging from the trees inside the shrine grounds. They also found B's dead body, hanging from a tree inside the forest. Apparently they found notes that appeared to be written by the people themselves, so all of the deaths were put down to group suicide, accidents, and natural causes. However, the number of corpses they found, in addition to the people who had left the village, didn't add up, meaning there were still some bodies they hadn't found yet. The people of influence within the village did their best to make sure all of this information never went public. I had them show me B's suicide note, and I noticed something strange in it. This is what his note said. August 14th, 6 p.m. Whoever finds this note will no doubt have found my dead body as well. I'm about to head into the forest surrounding Shoga Pond. I'm leaving this behind so that I don't have any lingering regrets. I'd like to thank my two friends for all the times we laughed together and all the times they got angry at me as well. The time written on the letter was an hour and a half before B and I met up, meaning that by the time B showed up late to A's house, he was already dead. But thinking about it, if that was so, then who was the B who arrived late? Who went to the Oni cabin? Who returned to the village and then went back to the Oni cabin again? And who was dragged off by the Shosha? Supposing B was already dead by the time he showed up late to greet us, and if he really was someone else by that point, I still thought he was B. A few days after the police entered the village and discovered the villagers had all died, a member of the priest's family committed suicide. This person was distantly related to A by blood, but they often took care of her. Perhaps I will be next, but I hope that A is somehow able to escape all this, the priest said. According to him, the villagers who had escaped the village were being attacked because of their connection to it. Over the course of several days, this curse had changed shape, using the family ties everyone had. Those who had died in the village were bringing misfortune upon those who had escaped, and so fate was underway. A few weeks after the suicide, both A's parents and my own handed us over to an acquaintance of both families. The last thing they said to both of us was, "Cleanse yourself of your connections." At the time, I had no idea what those words meant. A few days after that, both our parents died in car accidents. Although they were in different places, their deaths happened at almost the exact same time. They died instantly in a car accident at an intersection. When a staff member of the facility told us about it, both A and I cried until our tears dried up. It was like we were stuck in a long dream. A few days later, my grandparents and great-grandparents died in a deliberately lit fire. A few days after that, A's remaining family members returned to the village and committed suicide together. Honestly, we were so scared, so we didn't watch TV, but it probably made the news somewhere. At the time, we didn't understand why they left us at the facility, and it took quite some time until I realized that both our parents likely cut their ties to us in the nick of time to save us from the curse of the village. I've gone on for quite a bit about the annihilation of the village. At the start, I said I didn't have much time because the village curse is catching up with me. I intend to go back and do what I need to do. Long ago, I heard there was a person who could cleanse me of the curse, and I went to visit them in their village. And apparently, thanks to that magic, a lot of villagers there died as well. I'm tied to a lot of cursed people. We can't cleanse this village of the curse, but we can disperse it amongst numerous people, making its power weaker. There might even be some people reading this thread who have some connection to the curse of the village. If something bad happens to you, proceed carefully. Reading this story alone won't curse you, so don't worry. But if you try to dig too deeply into it, there's a good chance it will affect you too. Honestly, I'm glad you guys listened to my story. I haven't ever told anyone about that village and what happened there, so I'm feeling somewhat relieved now. Thank you for listening. Oh yeah, there's something important I forgot to mention. A and I eventually moved away from the facility to live with distant relatives, and we ended up moving to America. A and I, while being close childhood friends, were also second cousins, and our families had deep ties. Family members occasionally got married to other distant family members. After we moved to America, we struggled to get used to our new lives while attending school. A went on to high school while I jumped ahead to university. As for why I did that, to put it simply, I had scores that allowed me to, but I honestly wanted to finish school as quickly as possible so I could support A. After I left graduate school, A and I returned to Japan, and after I started work, I married her. I honestly loved her, and she said she loved me too. A few months after we got married, we discovered she was pregnant, and she gave birth to fraternal twins. This was 15 years ago now. The village itself disappeared about 40 years ago now. As for what I need to do at that village, well, I need to seal the curse in. The village's name is Mioni Village, using the characters for Deep and Oni. It was never officially designated as a village, so this isn't its official name, but that's what everyone involved called it, and that's what all the literature that spoke of the village called it too. Although I was the one telling this story, there are still so many things I don't know regarding what happened at Mioni Village, and strange points that don't make sense. For example, what happened to B? Was he already dead when we saw him that time? Even now, I still don't know. I'll be heading back to the village in a few days to do what I forgot to do. Once I return, I'll start another thread. If you'd like to chat about this week's story, come and join us at the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. And don't forget to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories all this month, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.